Hello and welcome to Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today we have a very special treat. We have Tony Diaz, and he is an expert roofer and electrician, been doing solar since before they invented the sun. And we also have another special guest who was on the podcast on May 19th. And of course, that is Johan Alfsen. We're going to talk a bit about roofing. Johan's going to be here for about half of the part of this podcast. And then we're going to get into it with Tony a little bit deeper, but just a little brief introduction to Tony. And we're going to get into that a little bit later after Johan has to leave. He's had a roofing and solar company for 28 years. He's got 37 years of roofing experience, and we're going to get into all that. And one of the things that we all have in common is Quickmount PV. So Stuart Wentworth was the first person that I really worked with in the solar industry. He founded Quickmount PV, and I believe the same with Johan. And then Tony was a model for Quickmount PV. When I'd go onto their website, you'd always see Tony's face. So he's like very good looking guy. And we're going to hear more from Tony. He's also got a website called noutilitybill.com. And I'm wondering why they haven't put a hit out on him yet for that, with all the politics going on. So, hey, dudes, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Don. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So what I thought we could do early on while Johan is here is just to get into a little bit of what's going on. And so Tony's been at roofing for a long time, and he's kind of an expert at roofing, and we ask him for advice and stuff like that, but there's new stuff going on. And so one of the things that happened was in the early solar industry, people were doing what Johan has the patent for saying Goop in a prayer. So he invented that saying.
Oh, congratulations.
And everybody copied him. So if you ever hear anybody say Goop in a prayer, they stole that from Johan, and you owe him $100 for each time you say that. Right, Johan?
I didn't actually get it patented or trademarked, but I'll just take the credit here on your podcast.
And what about all the applications? Because we're still seeing Goop in a prayer right now.
Oh, yeah, totally. For sure.
They owe you royalties, brother.
Yeah, I mean, that literally came out of a presentation I gave, I think, in 2007 or 8 when I was working for Quickmount. And I do want to give Claudia Wentworth credit, too. Claudia and Stuart were the owners of Quickmount. I worked for them as a solar installer. Tony was kind of my mentor back then when I was a young punk in my 20s, just learning about roofing. And I've been on construction sites and did construction and did solar for the Wentworths. And then they started Quickmount. I thought it was brilliant. Like you said, Tony was the poster guy for us. I probably took those pictures that were on the website of Tony. And he was the one we were catering to where he's doing best practices. And the Goop and a prayer thing was me showing pictures of really crappy installs that installers have been doing and why we are, quote unquote, respecting the roof. And Tony had our back on that. And he was the example of what installers should be doing and they're not doing. And Tony's right that you still see some shoddy installs out there. There's products to solve that. Quickmount was the original one that solved the problem. But now we've kind of gone into this weird phase of, we went from Goop and a prayer to metal flashings like roofers would do. And now people are getting so lazy, or they just want it quick, fast. They just want to be so fast and so cheap. Like, that's the part that's not fun for me, that everybody wants to be the cheapest, fastest. Yes, we want to be fast, but we want to be quality. So now you're seeing products come out where, not to name names like Unirac, but they had a mount and some had followed them where they put a mount with a cavity and they shot the Goop in a cavity. And I believe, I could be wrong, there's litigation issues going on right now. I'm pretty sure it's a little hush hush, but that is like a fancy Goop in a prayer. It's Goop and a prayer and a cover. And the company I work for now, K2, wanted to do that because we have to compete with all these cheap mounts, right? And I said, no. We cannot do that. I'll leave the company if you're going to do that. I can't do that. So long story short, I looked into things like roof tech. And Tony, you may not be into it. Maybe you are, but roof tech and the guys over there have been trying to push it for a long time. I will say they had the most research and they had a track record of doing Butyl in Japan on comp shingle roofs for like 30 years. So we took that, we worked with them, we looked at their testing, and then we actually tested beyond that. And then I actually did become a believer in that system, because metal flashing is great, but you got to understand, guys are just hacking the roof and they're trying to retrofit a flashing into a shingle roof. You know as well as I do, Tony, that the steel strip on the back of those are getting more and more aggressive. And if you're in Arizona or Vegas, that stuff is glued down. And when you pry the shingle up to retrofit a metal flashing in, you can tear it up. So I can see the argument of a Butyl flashing going on top, you know?
Yeah, I mean, my response to that is that you end up tearing it up when you're trying to go to.
Yep.
Because we actually separate shingles all the time. And yeah, manufacturers are getting more aggressive with the adhesive because the shingles are getting thinner is what's happening. And so what they're trying to go ahead and they're trying to prevent is the effects of Bernoulli effect, where the air is going ahead and it's going up and over the roof and it accelerates speed. So if you have 25-mile-an-hour winds, and with the Bernoulli effect, it goes up and over the roof, then it can actually go ahead and increase wind speed by 2.5 times. So trying to go ahead and offset from making the shingles thinner, which is less weight, to make it more aggressive adhesive, but that adhesive can be separated. We do that all the time. Preferably, you can do it. Some of the adhesives, you have to mess around with it. You know, you see a certain shingle and you know that, okay, it's a lot better to do it when it's warm. Some shingles, it's better to do it when it's cold because the adhesive is easier to fracture apart. My experience with, and everybody has their own experience, but I can say this, I never really realized this until today. I was talking to a customer today. And so she's got an orphan system. It was one of the really big integrators that was out there that went belly up. And they installed a solar system to her existing roof. And now she's got leaks in the living room. And so she contracted for us to actually take off the solar, replace the roof, and put the solar back again. Well, when I was on the phone with her today, she was actually asking me some questions about the mounting. And I told her exactly what we're going to use. It's going to be a flashing product. And I came to the realization when I talked to her, I said, we've never had a leak yet. I've been doing solar since 2001, and we've never had a leak from a mount. And so this newer stuff that's coming out, maybe it's the cat's meow, but you know what? I mean, what I've been doing for all these years has been working, and I'm just going to keep on instead of taking a chance and doing something else. But what we do know, though, is that you look at probably the largest use of butyl ever is with DirecTV. The dish company, you know, they'd use the butyl and then they'd go ahead and they'd bolt down their dishes. The thing is, though, is that when we tear off those roofs and we get rid of those dishes, most customers actually got rid of the service and the dish is just up there. So we take it off and throw it away. And so what we do know is that as we're tearing off the roof, I mean, it's like 85%. You got dry rot underneath that butyl where the shingles are, where the penetrations were. But the reason why people don't really hear about it is because DirecTV was actually really good that they knew that if they had to install it on the roof, they'd do it on the eave.
Yeah.
Dry rot ends up being concentrated on the eave and it's not necessarily leaking into the house. So not very many of the average consumers or contractors have actually heard much about it because there hasn't been property damage other than replacing a rafter tail or some overhang board on the eve. So us actually seeing that, and you have to actually kind of visualize that, hey, look, if I'm going to put something down with butyl.
Is it all right? Can we explain what butyl is? Because a lot of people don't even understand.
Well, it's a peel and stick material is what it is. It's sticking material. It actually sticks down to the roof.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if there's like different grades of butyl, like some of it's lousy and some of it's great, or...
Yeah, I mean, some of them I've seen that are color gray. Most of the times they're black, but it's a rubberized material that has an adhesive on it, and it's supposed to stick to the surface. But the idea is to go ahead and sandwich that down and put some bolts through it. But I've always sat there and looked at it and said, well, as the water is draining down the roof slope, actually sitting there constantly hitting that point of connection. And the only thing that's actually going ahead and saving your integrity as a contractor is that butyl, and that's it. And if something goes wrong with the chemistry of that butyl, maybe they're making the most aggressive one ever that was used for 30 years in Japan, but there are manufacturing issues from time to time. But if that butyl actually goes ahead and deteriorates, then the water's coming in because it's directly fastened right in the plane of water drainage on it.
Yeah, so it's like this black rubber type of stuff, and they're putting them on the bottom of the attachment and then bolting down on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get nerdy about it, it's a synthetic rubber, like a copolymer. You can get all kinds of chemistry words in there, but basically, it's a synthetic rubber and it's malleable in most cases. You can have some other versions of it, but the one that they're using these days is malleable. So the idea is you're putting a mount down and you're driving through the butyl. Usually, you're doing self-tapping screws, and the butyl gets sucked into there. And it's almost like if I could have every solar installer be as good as Tony and his crew, I wish it. But the fact is as a manufacturer, I have to work with the how do I put this in the right terms? Dumbest installer out there.
That's a good term.
And, the newest guy, it's just, we have to move at the slowest moving installer who's doing it the worst, and got to make it dummy proof, really. So putting in a metal flashing is definitely the best. And I will give Snap Interact credit because I always liked their original mount that is actually doesn't exist anymore. That was a plate with a bolt coming through. It was a plate you put down and then you slip a flashing over it and it flashed over. To me, that was the best of both worlds. I would have put butyl on the bottom of that, stuck it down, attached it, then slipped the flashing over that, and that would have been the best. That doesn't exist anymore because it's too expensive for the industry. And that's the problem in the industry is we want to be cheap, 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 fast, fast, fast. O&M is big. I mean, Tony, I wouldn't be surprised if your business turns mostly into re-roof detached stuff,
Well, we've had so much of that business over the years, and it's been great for me because people look us up and we've got good reviews, but they look and they say, oh, roof and solar. So I just sold 2 of those jobs this week of solar and re-roofing and put it back again. But unfortunately, I mean, for those homeowners, one of them actually inherited the system, so he doesn't really feel the economic sting. The other one did buy the system. So it's a little bit different. But you look at the person that did actually buy the system, and if it did fail and the solar's got to come up and re-roof and put it back again, what is the economic impact of the diminished rate of return that the homeowner thought that they were going to get when they originally purchased the system, right? So back many years ago, NABCEP actually commissioned me to do a custom class. I think you probably remember about that, Johan. That first one that I did was standing room only. I remember that. People were sitting, I remember on the windowsills at Sacramento State University was the first CE conference for NABCEP. And it was funny, I was working the NABCEP booth the year prior, and Ezra, actually, the former director of NABCEP, told me, he said, Tony, I'm really, really concerned about how solar systems are being mounted and that it's going to be a black eye for the industry. And I want you to go ahead and customize this proposal and this presentation to go ahead and deliver, to go ahead and warn people, contractors about the methods of installation. And I said, oh, yeah, Ezra, that sounds great. And I thought it was never going to actually end up coming to fruition, and I didn't really want it to because it meant a lot of work for me. But then a couple of weeks later, Ezra started calling me. He's like, Tony, you told me that you do this. I want you to do this. I really want you to do this. I'm like, oh, man, I got to do this. And so, I had to create a presentation from nothing and build it up to be able to deliver to the solar industry because with our name, Roof and Solar, we were actually the first ones out there, roof and solar. We were the first ones in existence to actually do that combination. And so people would call us in the early days, and every time there was a failure, I would actually dissect it piece by piece is what I'd end up doing, and actually taking pictures and showing exactly where the failure points were. Do you remember seeing all that, Johan?
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember the raindrop ninjas.
Oh, yeah.
Where you said rain is like little ninjas that try to get into a weak point,
Yeah, the raindrop animation. Yeah, that was great. And I had guys after the NABCEP conference. I remember it started at Sacramento State University, and then it went to Albany, New York. And I never forget at the New York one, there was a couple integrators that came up to me and with their hats in their hand, and they said, oh my God, I created myself so much liability by doing this. The problem is that GAF is the largest roofing manufacturer in the country, and the average, with all their numbers, they're so sophisticated. The largest privately held corporation in the United States. And so they have the data. They actually show that the average problem on a newly installed roof is 8 years after the installation. Well, I argue that the same thing is true with solar. And just for 1 minute, of actually stepping back to the butyl again. Think about the butyl. Nobody thinks about the stresses that it's actually enduring on top of a roof because, I hold a license in thermography from the Infrared Training Institute. And if you've got a 70-degree ambient outside, I've clocked asphalt roofs at a 139, so 139 degrees. I mean, almost exactly double the temperature.
And so that's Fahrenheit?
Yeah, that's Fahrenheit. So 70-degree ambient outside, 139 on the roof. I mean, the asphalt shingles are a heat absorbing material. And by the time you get to 100 degrees outside, I bet you're at least about 170 degrees Fahrenheit by the time you're at 100. Because I know that once you get to about 100, when you're walking on the roof, it actually imprints the tread on your shoes into the roof. And if you actually roll your ankle on the roof, it'll take off the granule. So you've got this liquefaction of the granule at those high temperatures. How does the butyl actually continue to go ahead and stick to that liquefaction, to those oils that actually start separating at those high temperatures? And that's what I think is the primary problem with butyl. The interesting thing is that industries evolve. And as the solar industry evolved, like Johan was saying, is that we went from Goop and a prayer to flashing. But I'll go back to that for a minute, though. Because of our roofing side of the business, we never did Goop on a prayer. We always flashed.
Yeah. So are you saying you don't believe in prayer?
No, I definitely believe in prayer. Absolutely. Actually, a prayer paid off for me yesterday. But I'll go ahead and I'll tell the story of what happened. But at any rate, it's just that because we have the roofing component, it's so easy. I mean, I would have so many people at NABCEP come and ask me, they'd say, okay, well, how do we know how to flash something? And I would tell them, it's so easy. All you got to do is, as long as it looks legit. I mean, look at a pipe flashing, like a plumbing pipe vent on the roof. Look at that plumbing pipe vent, and that is your template of how to go ahead and mount into a roof. All you have to do is do it exactly like that, whether you're doing tile, metal, asphalt, or anything else.
Yeah, one of the things that I've had trouble figuring out is what is the definition of flashing? It seems that there's not really a definition of flashing.
It's a broad term. It really is. And there's a lot of confusion about it because you can have drip edge flashing, you can have fireplace flashing, you can have roof wall flashing. I mean, the one thing that is constant, though, is that the flashing, all these flashings that we're talking about, they're metal. You know, they're galvanized.
That was the way that I learned it working over at a roofing company. When I met you, I was working at a different roofing company.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
Doing the solar division with Stuart Wentworth and all that. But yeah, for them, the way they taught me was like flashing was overlapping stuff when it comes to solar. And now there's the companies that are doing the other ways. They're saying it's flashing with the butyl. And so does that fit your definition?
No, not mine. I mean, my definition being in the trade is flashing has to do with some kind of metal, a flat metal piece that is actually more weather resistant than shingles or underlayment or general roofing materials.
Where can I find that definition? Because I've been looking through all the residential code, all different places, and I can't find just like a...
Called Jeff Speed.
It's called Jeff Speed.
Yeah, they put it into, I don't know which committee it is anymore. I stopped doing all those committees because it's just a lot of time and not a lot gets done. But there is some definitions, and Tony's right that you can't just say like, what is a flashing? You know, there's drip flashing, there's edge flashing, there's chimney flashing, there's all kinds of flashing. But essentially it is traditionally a metal cover. You're talking about penetration flashing. That's a specific flashing, right? And Tony nailed it, that you can see why Tony was my mentor this whole time, because I did same presentations. The presentation he did for NABCEP are the presentations I kind of did my own version. You can call that the Respect the Roof era, I guess you can say. But I was doing those presentations, and I still get calls today of the same thing Tony's talking about. People say, what do I do on this roof? And if it's an uncommon roof, and I actually made a video of this, it seems like common knowledge, but a lot of people just need some guidance. But if you get an uncommon roof and you're not familiar with it, number one, find out who the manufacturer is. Number two, grab the manual and see how they do pipe flashings, and then just try to do that as best you can in a retrofit situation. And that was the essence of my whole customer service. And on all the years I've been doing solar, now we have mounts that we're making for comp shingle, tile, metal to mimic all that. The tricky part is doing it as good as a roofer would do when they're building the roof as a retrofit. And that's the tricky part. That 8-year mark that Tony is talking about, that GAF says that you start to see problems arise in roofing. You're right. You're going to start seeing that in solar too. Like, I had so many guys come up to me early on and say, I've been doing L feet on with Sikaflex, which is actually not compatible with comp shingle roofs, which is hilarious. And they'd say, I've been doing L feet to the roof with Sikaflex for 10 years. And I'm I'm like, okay, well, you better call those homes and see how they're doing, because give it like 8-10 years, and that's about the sweet spot when you're going to start seeing issues, and they do happen.
Close your business before it gets to 2 more years down the line, because leaks are coming.
Exactly. So going back to this butyl topic, if I could have everybody install metal flashings, I would. I mean, that was my whole mission, my whole years in solar, from anywhere in my early 20s up until my mid 30s. I was with Quickmount for 12 years, and that was my whole goal, is to get everyone to do metal flashings. And I could say that I succeeded, to the point where everybody copied Quickmount, and then Quickmount got bought. And now you're seeing people try to do a new evolution, which is this butyl stuff. And so I questioned it at first, but going back to, we have to move to the slowest possible solar installer, or I guess the least skilled solar installer. Breaking open the shingle as a retrofit and putting in the flashing is causing more harm than good for a lot of these guys. So they're relying on butyl as a way to be so easy, it's stupid, right? They don't even need sealant. They just drill down to the rafter. Hopefully they hit the rafter and it seals itself. So will it last? Let's find out. Let's do this podcast again. And how long has butyl been going? I'd say 2-3 years, 3 years maybe. So we got 4 more years to wait.
And I'm not completely angry about butyl application, because I end up being the benefactor of actually being able to, honestly, that's what ends up happening.
But you haven't seen butyl jobs leak yet, though, right? Granted, it's only been 3 years.
Yeah, I have actually seen it already. The little flat disc. I won't mention the manufacturer's name, but the little flat disc.
But that's not butyl. That's like a dry EPDM pad.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I never used it, so I just assumed that it was beautiful. But I've seen those leak. I have seen those leak. I have seen the one that you were talking about, installing it and then putting the caulking inside. Yeah, we got a job coming up to actually take off the solar and re-roof it and put it back with.
I want to come to that. When are you doing that?
Totally, dude. I'll get you over there. We'll do some fun dissecting photos.
Yeah, let's do that.
They're always great, Absolutely.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Shawn White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarShawn, that's Solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. Yeah, and perhaps there's another way of looking at it too. Like if the roof has 10 years or less left on it, then maybe it's okay not to use metal flashing and overlap things. And then if it has more than 10 years left on it, it would become more important to make a more timeless flashing.
Well, here's the really big question here, is that a lot of these roofing manufacturers like JF, they have what's called a golden pledge warranty. And with certainty, they've got the 5-star warranty. Owens Corning, they have an equivalent. I can't recall what they call their warranty. I've never done it before. But they're these engineered installations that you end up doing, and then the manufacturer goes ahead and takes on the warranty on behalf of everybody. They warrant the materials, they warrant the work from the contractor. And so I know that GAF, I'm not too sure about certainty, you have to look into it, but GAF, they specifically call out that you can only use flashing on their installation on a golden pledge. I actually spec'd it in 2010. They hired me as a consultant to spec what constituted a reasonable flashing to install with the golden pledge warranty. And so we've been seeing roofs where the solar contractor's in such a hurry to go ahead and get the thing built that they go ahead and they put these mounts on there that do not have flashing, and it's actually voiding the warranty on these roof systems from these large manufacturers. And you really have to go ahead and research what kind of installation it is, what's the warranties, and that way you're not liable later on down the line for actually voiding that warranty by just going ahead and installing whatever you want to on top of the roof. Yesterday, I was actually at a seminar with GAF, since they're on the topic. I went to a seminar yesterday. It was at Cache Creek, and there was a presenter that was actually presenting about insurance damage. And one of his slides was actually a direct dish up on top of the roof and the damage underneath it. So he had a picture of the dish and then the dish removed removed and the dry rot on the deck underneath it. And he specifically said, ladies and gentlemen, this is what's coming in the solar industry. So people in the roofing industry and everybody, all the roofers in the audience were laughing. And they start calling out, well, what about all the pilot holes that they drilled trying to go ahead and find the rafters? And then they just slide some flashing in between the shingles to go ahead and patch that up, or didn't even caulk the holes at all because they forgot because they were in such a big hurry. So I think as time goes on, it's funny, I was trying to mention earlier about evolution. And so our industry evolved from Goop and a prayer to this education. And it was so valuable of what Quickmount did. It was very unique. They were actually educating to drive the justification of paying a little bit more for their product to educate the solar public. And unfortunately, when Quickmount went ahead and got bought out, the new parent company didn't see the value in doing that, and they're going in a different direction. And so over time, you end up getting this turnover of people in the industry. And so the average installer that's working on the roof right now was not working on the roof 10 years ago. And so if you don't even have 5 years in the industry, or even 10, how would you actually see the trial and errors that I have in my 37-year career in the roofing industry? So just like the pitch pocket, those chem curbs, I'm trying not to call out any product in particular, but those little pitch pockets with the caulking, those are actually present in the roofing industry 30 years ago, and they failed in the industry. And roofers that have been around for that long know that those things don't work. Incidentally, we had a job that we had to go ahead and fix just a couple months ago that were actually all those. We had to go ahead and take off the array, take those all out. It was a single ply roof, so we had to go ahead and weld in all the boots and everything, which is more solid. I mean, there's no guesswork. I mean, that's going to work.
Can we explain what a pitch pocket is? It's like you build up like a wall around something and...
It's a curb, and then you actually go ahead and historically in the roofing industry, what we do is usually that curb would be like a metal box, and then you'd fill it with tar. So you'd have a post coming out, and then you'd fill it with tar, and we call it a pitch pocket because then the fastening point was buried underneath is how it was. Well, the modern day pitch pocket right now, it's just little plastic curbs that are attached together, and then they fill it up with caulking is what they end up doing. But to do anything correct, there's got to be some processes.
So you're sort of like drowning the attachment point.
You are, yeah. And essentially what you're hopefully doing is kind of trying to elevate the attachment point by burying it. But still, if you look at it, it's like, no, the attachment point is really not elevated. It's still at the plane of water drain because it's still the water's raining down, it's hitting the edge of that curb. And if for any reason that caulking is not compatible with the roof or fails chemically for any reason, I mean, the water is going to go directly in. That's where the water's at. It's right on the surface of the roof, and that's where the fastening point is.
So roofers don't use pitch pockets anymore, or just some of them do?
No, they use a lot of pitch pockets with tar is what they'll do. We'll also build those with single ply is what we'll do. But as far as actually constructing them with a plastic curb and caulking, I haven't seen any roofers do that. Roofers look at that and they laugh at that. And I've never seen a roofer use that type of product for installing equipment up on top of a roof. But over time, just with the revolving door of business owners, I mean, in the solar industry, not to harp, but I remember way back in the day, it was like just bewildered me of how many roofing contractors went out of business. In fact, when I used to go out and talk to a customer and they would actually go ahead and question how long we've been in business or how good of a job that we would do, I'd bring an old phone book with me and that was 2 years old. And I would open it up to the roofing section. I'd give it to the customer and say, okay, if you have some time, call these numbers and see who's still in business. And 2 years later, it was like 80% of them were out of business. And it always bewildered me. But with solar, it was like so much more. I mean, I've seen so many solar companies go out of business over time. And so when that happens, there's this revolving door of knowledge from the contractors that are able to go ahead and pass down knowledge to the installers up on the roof. And so that's why we have this evolution that we went from flashing, doing it the right way, going backwards, going back to trying to rely on something that's down and cheap and dirty. And that's doing this Butyl method now.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. It's going to be really hard for me to leave early if Tony's still on here because I'm going to want to keep rapping about this all day. So there might have to be a part two.
Don't worry, I'll call you when we got these jobs come up. I mean, I'm carefully documenting all of them.
It's great.
I'm documenting all of them because when it comes up and people question me, it's like, hey, look, here's the pictures. This is what's going on out there. You know, it takes time for things to fail. And some people aren't in the business for the long haul. I know some installers, it's not their dream job. They're going to go on to do something else.
Right.
And people don't really go ahead and visualize and think, 10, 15, 20 years out like I do of what's going to go ahead and happen with this job later on down the line. Is it going to perform? What's the weak point? Can we engineer out that weak point and be able to go ahead and furnish the customer with something that we know in just about 100% absolute that there's not going to be any failure? And that's always been our goal.
So this unpacks a lot of stuff. So the GAF rep that showed that leaky satellite attachment and said this is the solar industry and it's coming, he's not wrong. And I'm in a tough place because I've got salespeople who want to sell, and I've got their customers who's really wanting to demand basically these crappy mounts. And we're trying to find an in-between of quality and good price. So the Butyl seems to be holding up well. Is it my first choice? No, I'd like a combo of things, but I do see the testing. I challenge our company to do the testing, and they have done accelerated heat tests. I'll send you some of the testing reports. And is it going to last the full 25 years? We'll see. The only time will tell. But I mean, what you were saying about Quickmount and people changing over hands, I saw the writing on the wall. And that's why I left. I realized that if you notice, the Respect the Roof tagline from Quickmount is gone. That doesn't exist anymore. And they don't even use it because they don't care. It's sad they didn't take the brand and the quality and use it. They just shoved it into being a product for Iron Ridge or something. So that's kind of sad in my opinion. And that's why I left, because I didn't see that the heart of why we started it was there anymore. And I moved over to K2 because they didn't have roof attachments, and I helped them develop flashings and mounts. And now we're in this funny place where it's like, okay, how low do we go? Those pitch pockets you talk about, you're going to start seeing manufacturers in solar trying to develop these roofing products that are like going to compete with ChemLink. Is it going to work? I don't know. It's like, how do we get every solar installer to do jobs the right way, the way you do, Tony? I mean, that's what I think I had some success getting everybody up to speed, right? When we did the Quickmount stuff.
The only way to whisper on a prayer to do it is through education, but it would take a lot. It wouldn't just be respect on the roof. It would be the visualization of actually trying to do not only what is actually ethically right, but to try to go ahead and have people, installers, educate them, their own benefits, the company's benefits as a culture to not only go ahead and use the right products, but apply them the right way. Because back to the chem curbs, I know a lot of the chem curb failures that are out there is because the installers are just putting the chem curb and filling it up with caulking and then just caulking around the rim of the bottom of the plastic curb instead of cleaning the roofing materials. Then that way you can maximize the adhesion, and caulking the rim on the plastic curb before you squeeze it down onto the roofing material. I mean, a lot of these products are actually skipping steps.
Absolutely.
These products are actually very unforgiving if you go ahead and skip any steps. So it takes a tremendous amount of education on all fronts, from manufacturers, from Respect the Roof to levels of organizations. And I think that maybe the combination of the manufacturer steps forward again and tries to revive Respect the Roof. There was support from NABSTEP of continually having me go out and present the presentations on current failing products and showing those to the industry, because you can't believe what you hear, right? That's the old adage. But you certainly go ahead and believe what you see. And when you see the pictures of the failure on the screen in the presentation, it turns you into a true believer. But like I said, it's a constant message that has to take place because there's a revolving door in the industry.
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, if I'm being totally honest, once Quickmount left the space, my whole goal was to try to get everybody up to speed as, let's do what Tony's doing. Everybody should be working that high level, and we're not, and that sucks. And I was very passionate about driving that message. And to be totally honest, I lost my passion the past couple of years because everyone's just, it's like this race to the bottom, man. And you're kind of inspiring me again to like wake up that 20-year-old version of me to slap me in the face and say, hey, we can get everybody up to speed again. Maybe, maybe we show the pictures, get back out on the road and do presentations. And not to say scare the shit out of people, but you kind of have to say like, this is coming.
Good for you, Johan. There's a lot of opportunity for you right now in the industry.
Yeah, but no one wants to pay for it.
Yeah, but you know what? What contractors should consider is this. So I actually went to a solar trade show with Shawn a couple months ago. Which one was it, Shawn?
That was RE Plus Northern California, and it was fun watching you lecture everybody at the booths.
Yeah. What happened with RE Plus, check this out. So I'm not going to mention the manufacturer, but I had one of my distributors there. And the distributor's like, hey, use this new product that they just came out with. They're like one of the top manufacturers out there, and they're making this solid new product. And, it's a cat's meow. It's Butyl. You just go ahead and screw it down to the roof. And I'm sitting there and I told them, I said, well, I've never really used those products before. And I said, well, what's the warranty? And he says, oh, well, the warranty is such and such. I can't remember if he said it was like 10 years or whatever, And so I said, yeah, but what's involved with that warranty? And I said, I bet you if we go over there to the booth, and I bet you if we go ahead and we talk to them, and I bet you if I go ahead and ask the hard questions over and over and over, it's going to go ahead and it's going to lead down to what are you going to do if the mount ends up failing? And the manufacturer's going to come back and they're going to tell me, they're going to say, okay, we're going to give you a replacement mount as a contractor. They're not going to pay for the property damage on the inside. They're not going to pay the labor to actually change out the mount. They're not going to pay any of the residual costs for anything other than give me a mount at their manufactured cost. So if they're selling it retail and you're getting it from the distributor for $14 a piece, I mean, you better darn Skippy that they're only making it for $1. So they go ahead and they give you a price replacement mount. He told me, he said, oh, no, that's impossible, Tony. It wouldn't go that way. I said, let's go over to the booth, and Shawn was right there. Remember that, Shawn? And I go over to the booth and I specifically asked the guy, and the guy says, he goes, oh, nobody ever asked me that before. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to go upstairs to go ahead and climb the ladder to figure out what the answer is to that. But I don't think that's what we would do. We would pay to replace the mount. I said, okay, no problem. And he said, you know what? He goes, I'm going to climb the ladder and I'll get back with you in about a half an hour to an hour. And so, yeah, we were walking down one of the other aisles. It was a small show. And the guy found me and he told me, he said, hey, can I speak with you privately? And we want to go back to our booth. And so I went back to the booth with him and he confirmed to me, he said, if the mount fails, all we're going to do is give you a replacement mount.
It kind of reminds me of like when you buy a solar module and it's got a 10-year warranty for materials and 25 for performance.
Yeah.
And so some salespeople are out there like the whole solar system is warranted for 25 years.
Yeah.
And they're getting their customers to think it includes the mounts and everything.
Oh, yeah. We're like with solar panels where they say 25-year performance warranty, but 5-year workmanship warranty. And so I've seen instances where the panel, the frame is falling off of the panel. So how are you supposed to just keep it up on the roof? You can't, but it doesn't actually trigger a warranty from them. And all the manufacturer does is that they respond back and they say, oh, okay, give us some IV curve traces. And it's like, no, it has nothing to do with the IV curve traces. It has to do with the structural integrity of the panel. Oh, that only had a 5-year warranty. It's out of warranty.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily, I've never used those types of off brands that have done that. I've always used just the most solid brand in the industry that's been great and just have not had any structural failures ever with those products. Yeah, I mean, once in a while we might have a couple production issues from time to time, but it's very, very seldom. But as a contractor, for me, it's like, hey, I want to ask those hard questions because my business model is that I want to be in business for another 20 years. I got both of my boys, 16 and 12, that are actually have their eyes set on actually taking over this business. And so I have to pass a baton to them that's shiny. I don't want to go ahead and pass a bad business to them. And so I sit there and I think about these things. Yeah, the one fact is about, and it's always bothered me too, just like Johan, is the race to the bottom in this industry. And, my argument to contractors is most contractors think that they got to be the cheapest to be able to get the job. And when you're the cheapest, then yeah, you got to use the cheapest method. You got to save money. But I question, why have I been in business and prospered for 28 years, doing things at the highest level and charging for it? And I've been to contracting classes before, specifically with GAF, where they sit there and they talk about, they say, why be the cheapest anyways? Let's say you got to be the cheapest roofer, because it's universal with any type of construction trade, whether it's solar or plumbing or what else. But let's say you want to be the cheapest roofer. That's where you want to be in the industry. And you've got to do 200 roofs a year. You got to sell 200 roofs a year. You've got to go ahead and support the infrastructure of office staff to be able to go ahead and handle doing 200 roofs a year. Why not just increase your prices by 25%? You're not going to get 200 jobs. You're probably going to only get 125 jobs. But if you actually work the math work, you end up realizing that you're actually making more money. And not only are you making more money if you charge more and be the highest in the industry and do the best work, but charge for it, but you end up with less stress and you've got more of a buffer just in case something goes wrong with that job. Like, let's say you miss something where you're just like, oh man, the salesman told the homeowner that they're going to put the conduit in the attic and it's like super hard. There's no space. It can be done, but it's going to take them 3 days. I mean, if you got some meat on the bones there, then you can still go through and actually save face and get that done and still at least break even, but not lose money. And so I think the problem of it is just the typical contractor culture that there's not enough education on the business side with contractors, techniques of actually going ahead and toying with the numbers and selling your price and building your value. Because like for us, I mean, we don't get every single job out there, but I get the jobs for customers that want quality. Those are the jobs I walk in there, and most of those customers don't even want to get a price from anybody else.
Yeah. So just for me referring to people, I was referring to some people and the customer would come back and get mad at me. So actually, I'm just referring to Tony now these days. But
Yeah.
So it's funny you bring that up, Tony, that the sales training, that's something that people don't do. And when I was doing early quick mount stuff, I remember our mounts used to be $26 a pop.
Yeah.
And now you're getting mounts that are like $4. It's insane, right? And I mean, back then, $26 was only, the cheapest mount was more like 15. But now, things have changed. But back then I used to sell them on this more expensive product. And I said, yeah, this is more expensive, but you're going to get the job done faster. You're going to get it done right. And you can sell on this. Show them, like, what installer is talking about roof penetration? None of them. So you can talk about it. And here are some slides to show them. Here's what the other guy is doing. Here's what you're doing. And here's why. And show, they're going to be concerned about 45, 50, sometimes 70 or 100 holes in their roof. And they're going to want to know what you're doing about it. And people are scared. I've had some installers say, oh, no, we don't talk about roof penetrations. It's like, why not? Because you're scared, right? You're scared to talk about it. And then other contractors latched on to that and they said, wow, this is huge value to sell the quality. And I'll give companies like Revolution in Hawaii. I did some work with their sales team and I trained them on how to sell the quality of the product. And they took it and ran with it. And they sold so many jobs. And they're still going, actually. One of the owners bought the company and took it in his direction. And they're all about really robust, really high quality, and they're still selling high quality systems. So those are the kind of guys that I like to work with. But unfortunately, there's always going to be the cheapskate who's going to underbid. But I always say this to somebody is, if you're a homeowner, let's just say you're buying a solar system and you get a bid, just like you get work done on your car, major work on your car, you blow an engine or something, you're going to get a bid. You're going to check out a couple shops, shop around. And if you get a solar system on your house, you're going to go and say, okay, I got a bid from this guy, this guy, this guy. And if I got bid 1, 2, and 3, and bid number 1 guy says, we could do this job tomorrow. No problem. Let's go. Sign the paper here. And then I got bid number 2 that says, I don't know, you have some roof damage. We need to fix the roof. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but we want to fix the roof so it's a good platform for solar. And then we'll do the solar and it's going to add a little bit of cost. Maybe we can work it out with the rebate system. Who knows? But this is the cost and we need to do some repairs first. Then I'm going to go with that guy, even if he's more expensive. You're going to go for the guy that says, we'll do it tomorrow. And they don't even point out the roof leaks or the water damage or the dry watt near the chimney. And that's why I tell solar installers too, if you don't have a roofer on staff, then you better get familiar with a roofer, because half your business is going to start to be re-roof situations or fixing the roof in that area before you do the job. So sales training is huge.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Because I mean, what I tell customers over and over is that foundation of the project for a solar system is the roof. If it's going on top of the roof, that's the foundation. If that ends up going ahead and crumbling, then so does your investment. So you're absolutely right about that. I bet you that owner of the Hawaii company, he loves you for what you did for them, of actually getting them down the path of doing things quality and providing them with quality products. And what I'd like to say with any of the public that actually views this podcast is that if they're interested in actually doing some really, really quality work, they need to go to a hold of you, Johan, because I mean, that's what you want to do, is you want to actually encourage quality work in the industry. Yeah, and I think it's hard for homeowners too, because most homeowners I find, they never bought a solar system before. They've only done a handful of construction projects on their home. They don't have a lot of experience. And so because they've never bought a solar system before, I think what most homeowners do is that they actually lead to what they do know, and that's an electronics purchase. So they actually go ahead and they remember how they bought a TV set. Hey, whether I go ahead and get it at Best Buy or Costco, it doesn't make any difference as long as it's an 85-inch Samsung. And they go ahead and they analogize that for the solar process. But unfortunately, what happens is that they forget that it's a construction operation with the human element. And the reality is, if you'll agree with me, Johan, which I think you will, is that if the homeowner had unlimited budget and they hired 100 contractors to do the exact same job, they would end up with 100 different results,
Yeah, it's true. And you're right that you said this earlier. It's not just solar. Like, I go into a building and like, if you're a homeowner and you start looking at the electrical of a house and you're like, wow, there's some shoddy work going on here. Like, we're not the only ones. So we're just young and we grew fast in the trades, right? Solar is kind of the cool kid around the block, and love them or hate us, but we're trying to do our best. And solar is, I would say, sexier than regular construction. But, the buzz and the high is not over, but it's like, now we need to get real with it. And we're starting to see solar become just a regular commodity, which is great in some aspect. But what are we going to do now? Like, are we going to be responsible as an industry, or are we just going to like keep following the leader and doing shit work? I don't think so. And I don't want to. And to be totally honest, I love riding motorcycles, and I thought about leaving the industry and just working with motorcycle guys, but I think I would miss this too much. But the reason I say that is because I don't know, I'm a passionate person. I think you can tell. And I think you guys all are too. But like, I don't want to race to the bottom anymore. I don't want to come out with a crappy product that does just enough. I want to work on stuff that's good. Essentially, I love helping people, but how do you make a living on that? And before, Quickmount and the Wentworths believed in me to take a product that had a solution to a problem, but now the problem has become so complex. So Shawn, we're probably going to have to do like a chapter of these podcasts, because we got to solve this, and we should check back in with each other to see how we're doing, because Jeff Spees is another one who's been a soldier in the industry trying to get people to do things right, and to go to the electrical side, which my whole career has been in the roofing side, but go to the electrical side. I have some really good friends doing O&M right now. And you go to like, I don't know if you ever go on Facebook and you go to the solar installers page, there's some funny stuff up there, or crapsolar.facebook.
I've never seen it. Yeah.
Gotta check that.
Check it out. I learned something new today. But I mean, yeah, we go out and we see this crazy stuff and we're just like, oh my God, with electrical. But yeah, I'll go ahead and, so crap solar, you said?
Yeah, it's global. So you see a lot of guys in Europe posting stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you get it in the US too. You get all kinds of systems. I have a photo album on my phone. It's the Solar Hall of Shame. And it's just crappy installs or things that people have found. For some reason, they love to send me pictures like, check out this one. And it's just like the worst installs ever. So I have a whole library.
You got one you want to explain?
You got to start a new book that's about batteries.
Yeah, right. See, that's the other thing, is that's what I mentioned, is the electrical side. There's probably all kinds of stuff, and I'm not going to try to act like I'm not an electrician. There's probably a whole nother chapter of issues on the electrical side that I don't even know about.
So what kind of major battery manufacturers out there? So they actually, oh man, they loved our work, I remember we did the first 2 jobs of that product, and they went ahead and flew their inspector all the way from East Coast out to go ahead and take a look at it. And he's got his punch list and he's all ready to go ahead and tag us, because he's sitting there looking, oh, Century Roof and Solar, these guys can't really know much about electrical, didn't know that we're electricians and hardcore ones. And he goes through and he couldn't find a single problem problem. He just got back on his plane and went back to the East Coast scratching his head. So we ended up having notoriety there at the manufacturer being the best. And they would send us to special interest jobs to go ahead and take care of those. Because we always felt that, whether it's an array on the roof or whether it's batteries on the side of the house or in the garage, it's got to look beautiful, because you want to try and make it look as least industrial as possible to encourage other people to actually go ahead and buy it. But what is so darn funny is that the manufacturer, they started actually naming different battery jobs from different contractors according to the level of quality. And they never told me all the names and everything, but they told me, they were like, oh yeah, we've got names for all these different crappy jobs out there with these batteries now. And we wish that all of them were actually being installed like Century Roof and Solar, which was very complimentary, but it's just funny internally inside the manufacturer, they're sitting there going ahead and cracking on these contractors, crappy electrical work,
Yeah. I'd love to talk about this all day. I mean, Shawn, I don't know where you post your channel, but we should push this out. People need to hear this stuff. I'm sure they want to jump into conversation too, because this is a big topic. We should be doing these talks at NABCEP. I'm on the NABCEP committee for the technical sessions. And Tony, don't be surprised if I call you up and try to get you out there and we just make a whole panel session out of this, because this is solar gold, if you ask me. This is good information.
Yeah. No. I mean, how forward thinking was Ezra? To actually have the vision back in 2016 to go ahead and get this started.
Totally.
2016 might have been 2014, but they sent me 4 years in a row at that time. Albany, New York, back to Denver, Colorado, and then San Diego.
Yep. I've been to every NABCEP conference. I told Shawn from NABCEP, I told him, I don't think he realized, I've been to every single NABCEP conference because That's my favorite one, because you got all the all-stars there, right? I think they should incorporate some of this stuff we're talking about. So to end on my side, I appreciate you guys bringing me on and talking about this, because it's kind of relighting the Chilean flame inside of me. I got that passion that just gets lit.
That's high value you bring to the table, Johan. I love it.
You guys are relighting that for me, and I appreciate it because I have to have that in my life. And one of the things, rather than bitching about it, let's do something about it. So I think we can do it within one NABCEP tests and exams need to get more strict on this stuff.
Maybe they could have a NABCEP roofing certification too.
Well, maybe they should. I always appreciated RISE. Remember the NRCA came out with RISE? It just kind of died. It's so sad. But yeah, I was on that committee, I think, with you, and it just died.
What was that? RISE, Roofing and Solar Education or something like that?
Roof Integrated Solar Energy, I think it was. And the NRCA is the National Roofers Contractors Association that started it. Yeah, it was a nonprofit, and I was on that technical committee with a couple guys, and it just kind of fizzled out. They couldn't get the funding. So like I say, this is all great stuff, and I'd love to do consulting for people or help people with products, but are people going to pay for it? That's why I've always worked for companies, because some companies do want to pay for it. But, where are we going to make the most impact? And I think NABCEP is a good start at their conference when you have these conversations. And then in these exams, we need to start getting into that. And the other part that we haven't even unpacked is teaching the guys who are going to get into this from the beginning. I'm a big fan of workforce development. And that's something I really want to get into more, is teach them from the beginning. Here's the right way to do it. Every installer in the country loves to complain about not having enough qualified guys, but nobody wants to do the work to train those people.
What a mistake.
And bridge the gap, right? And bridge the gap. That's the big part. You got trained people, and then you need to bridge the gap to the people who need the trained people. So that's something I'm still trying to figure out. And, I always thought SEI kind of had that going on a little bit. But when it comes down to it, let's be honest, money rules all. That's the saddest part. If I could just dedicate my life to this, I would. But I also have to, I've always been single, no kids. So my expenses have been cheap. But now I'm starting to think about starting a family. I need to pay the bills, but I don't need to be rich, but I need to be comfortable, and I need to do this work. And I'm an environmental student graduate, you know that? And the biggest opportunity was nonprofits. And they'd tell you, oh, you can get paid this much money, but your passion, right? Yeah, that you're doing what you love. Fuck that. Sorry.
It doesn't pay the bills. Yeah.
It's I think teachers need to get paid what they're supposed to be getting paid, and we're the teachers in this industry. And so good for you, Tony, for being successful. I applaud you. And, I don't know if you know that, but you were always my mentor, And,
oh, thanks, Johan. I appreciate it. Yeah. But before we go, I just wanted to tell you too, Johannes, back to NABCEP real quick, is I have a lot of love for you, man. You're like a brother, and so I appreciate everything. We had some really fun times. But back as it relates to NABCEP is that Ezra had this vision at that time. Now that I think of it, I think it was 2014. And he had been in the industry for such a long time. And he had this vision of actually improving and also identifying that there was a huge problem with the way that installations were going down. And so he got me to make the presentation, and I did it. And then he passed the baton to Richard Lawrence. And Richard really believed in that same vision that Ezra had. He loved it. But unfortunately, when Richard left, the next regime, they forgot all about the importance. They didn't know about that importance. So it's kind of like what we were discussing earlier, that the revolving door, that, information can be lost. And that's what's happened as it relates to NABCEP. And maybe the good of this podcast will come out that we actually go ahead and jumpstart some training going again. And I still do actually maintain the continuing education certification of that class. So I still have that going on, so we can easily go ahead and get it back up and going again.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm all for it. I'm also thinking about doing I think you had talked to some of the guys at SEI about doing a class that's kind of like online class to teach newbie installers of here's how to be roof crew, here's how to be boots on the roof if you want. And I'm still thinking about starting up that class. And Heat Spring is a cool avenue that I've been going with. The company I work for now, K2, I did K2 Pro, which actually that was my baby at Quickmount. We had Quickmount Professional or whatever, and we were going to do that, and that died. As soon as it got bought, it died. And so I'm taking it to K2 now and doing K2 Pro, and I have classes on Heat Spring, but I could dive so much deeper into that. And I'll shoot you a line, Tony. And I'm going to be in the Bay Area. I moved down to San Diego for work and for motorcycles year round, but I'm coming back to the Bay to visit some family soon. Let's start this new, let's pick it back up. It's not new. Let's pick it back up.
Tell your parents that I said hi too.
I will.
Yeah.
And speaking of Heat Spring too, Johan and I just did some recording yesterday in Oceanside for material that we're going to put in my Heat Spring PV Associate Boot Camp.
Yeah.
That prepares people for the NABCEP exam.
Oh, that's great.
Really cool material.
Yeah, we could do much more.
Yeah, we're going to do a bunch more for all kinds of stuff and get everybody all up to date on the best way to do roofing and how to prevent leaks and all this great stuff too. Another thing too is Johan mentioned a few names. So like one of them was Jeff Spees a couple of times, and he's on the podcast April 28th of 2024 this year recently.
I'll crash that one too.
Yeah,
totally.
I'll just be the crasher who just crashes all your podcasts.
That's great. No, that's good. But well, actually with Jeff, we talked mostly about the history of the solar industry and his Solar Roots movie.
Oh, yeah.
So we didn't talk any technical stuff really.
No, that's awesome.
So he's going to come on again and do some technical stuff. So that'd be great.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. As you know, he's real heavily in the codes and standards for batteries right now for energy storage.
Yeah. And then Ezra, who's the director that Tony was mentioning, he said that he wanted to be on. And so we need to schedule that. And then, of course, Johan, he was on the podcast just recently, May 19th. And then also Richard Lawrence was mentioned too. And he was on May 12th.
Nice.
Wow. That's awesome.
You ought to do one with some more of the women in the industry. My sister's an engineer. She's literally testing and blowing up batteries for standards right now.
Oh, wow. Can we do that? That's great. Yeah. Let's get Jennifer on here.
Cool, guys. Well, I got to run. I'm actually gearing up for a job in Arizona, but really great talking to you guys. You guys should keep talking, and I'd love to continue this conversation. And Tony, I'll reach out to you and we'll pick it back up.
Sounds great, Johan. I look forward to it. You have a fantastic weekend.
Yeah, I was just there in Arizona watching the Stones. So say hi to Mick for me.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Thanks.
Cheers, Johan. Take care.
All right. Thanks. Okay, Tony. So it's great having you here on the podcast. Is there anything else that you want to mention or give some website information, people where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can find us on most of the platforms out there, on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on LinkedIn, www.noutilitybill.com, centuryroofandsolar.com. So there's plenty of places to find us. I like helping people too, like Johan mentioned. And if you need some help with something, then give us a call and we'll be able to, we do consulting in the solar industry, roofing industry for years. I even worked the two largest class action litigation cases in the solar industry. One settled for $27 million and the other one for $10 million. And I was the guy on the ground trying to go ahead and figure out what the failure points were on those systems. So a lot of knowledge and willing to go ahead and share some of that knowledge with other contractors and manufacturers out there in the industry.
Well, thanks, Tony. Thanks for sharing your knowledge today. And let's do this again. We have a lot more that we could talk about. We could go on for hours. And thanks for listening to Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. If you want to get yourself NABCEP certified or get the NABCEP Associate credential, check it out. Go to solarsean.com.
Wow.
Woo!